really liking what you do, whatever area that you get into. Given that, even if you're the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. I'd say, and also if you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. I mean, it's something that your mind is drawn to, and if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think.
But do you still have that kind of freshness when you use the car yourself? Or you have been used to that and lost the excitement?
In my case, it's a little tricky because I'm always looking for what's wrong. In order to make the car better, I always have to be thinking, I have to think very critically. And so when I see the car, I see all the things that I think need to be fixed to make it better. And so it's easy to lose the sense of wonder or just see the flaws. But it's a difficult thing to reconcile, because if you want to make something better, then you must analyze it for the flaws.
Yes.
And but then that kind of prevents the enjoyment of it. It's a difficult dichotomy. In terms of our competitiveness, I think it mostly comes down to our pace of innovation. Our pace of innovation is much faster than the big aerospace companies or the sort of country-driven systems. And this is generally true. If you look at innovation from large companies or from smaller companies are generally better at innovating than larger companies. And it has to be that way from a Darwinian standpoint, because smaller companies would just die if they didn't try innovating. Because otherwise people just keep buying the product from the big company. So then why is SpaceX more innovative? I think it's probably because we've got like a super engineering-driven culture. I mean, we're running kind of the Silicon Valley operating system, but you have a fairly flat hierarchy. You promote rapid communication. Sort of a best ideas wins culture, as opposed to this, having the seniority of the person decide the solution. Which, I mean, that should never be the case in engineering. It should always be, a rational basis.
Well, I really think it's just like if you want to advance technology, you've got to recruit the world's best engineers and then create an environment which enables them to be as innovative as possible. So the reward structure, you need to really reward and encourage innovation, and punish lack of innovation. So it's got to be both. It's just a stick and carrot. Ideally more carrot than stick. That's my new philosophy. More carrot, less stick. So yes. So the thing is that in a lot of companies, you have a risk-reward asymmetry where bold moves are, if they go wrong, are punished. But sort of keeping your head down is not punished. But that's not good. That will result in a very conservative outcome. So it has to be a requirement that there is significant advancement, and simply the lack of doing something significant is bad.
I think it's also important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. So the normal way that we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. We're doing this because it's like something else that was done, or it's like what other people are doing.
When you're building something new, there's going to be mistakes, and it's important to recognize those mistakes, acknowledge them, and take corrective action. And the success of a company is very much more about how quick are you to fix the mistakes, not will you make mistakes.
Or admit mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you see the difference between a startup that is successful and one that is not, and it's because the successful one, they both made mistakes, but the successful one recognized the mistakes, fixed them very quickly, and the unsuccessful one tries to deny that the mistakes exist.
So you are very famous in saying that failure is actually an option, and if you're not failing, that means you're not innovative enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I like failure. I mean, who likes failure? It's terrible. But if you only do things that are certain to succeed, then you're only going to be doing very obvious things. Manufacturing is building the machine that makes the machine. And if you think the machine is important, well, building the machine that makes the machine is also extremely important. And more often than not, what I found is the manufacturing is harder than the original product. Like, for example, at Tesla, we can make like one of a car very easily, but to make thousands of a car with high reliability and quality and where the cost is affordable is extremely hard. I'd say maybe 10 times harder than just making one prototype, but maybe more. And then at SpaceX also, it may be approaching an order of magnitude harder to manufacture rockets and launch a lot of them than to design one in the first place. So I really think a lot more smart people should be getting into manufacturing. And it's kind of fun. So it's like, I don't know, it's sort of got a bad name for a while, but it's really interesting.
Tell me, what is an entrepreneur to you?
I think somebody that is probably somewhat of a generalist, even though they may have specific strengths in certain areas, technical, business, or wherever.
And generalist, you mean just kind of like see the bigger picture?
Certainly see the bigger picture, but I mean in terms of skills. I actually think most people can be a generalist, but being a generalist means doing some things that you don't necessarily like doing.
I don't like doing things that I don't like doing.
Right.
Consumer, if you've got great technology, you want to go all the way to the end consumer. Don't tell it to some bonehead legacy company that doesn't understand how to use it.
Being innovative can be very exciting in life. Doing business sometimes requires, persistence, and sometimes could be very boring. Do you have the same fun from innovation as from business, running a business?
Well, I mean,
or would you rather to be just an innovator, engineer, instead of a business owner or runner?
I mean, I'd love to just do innovation and just do engineering. But you raise a good point, because a lot of life in general, in any job, there's like you have to do your chores. There's
because nobody else can do that for you, right?
Well, I think to be successful at almost anything, you have to do the tough stuff and as well as the enjoyable stuff. You have to do the boring stuff as well as the non-boring stuff. And if you don't do your chores, then bad things will happen. But if they don't do the things that they don't like to do, then the company will be in trouble. Like you have to, you basically, like it's more fun to cook the meal than to clean the dishes. Okay, but you need to clean the dishes.
You need to do both.
Yes, you need to do both, exactly.
Your skill as a sort of like an individual engineer can make a very big difference. When a company is large, you have to kind of teach a lot of people to do it. You have to be a force multiplier, as opposed to like if you have a little band, like if you're like a dozen swordsmen or something, and you're an ace swordsman. Okay, great. That's going to make a difference in a little battle, but not if there's 12,000. Like you can't like run along the entire battle line. It doesn't work. So you have to try to teach people en masse different approaches, and just make sure that that you reward the right behavior, that the reward structure is incenting the right behavior. This is incredibly important. Economics 101, whatever you incent is likely to happen. In fact, it would be bizarre if it didn't. So statistically speaking, it will definitely be what happens. So the incentive structure, reward and punishment must be sensible. And this sounds very obvious, but in most organizations, the true reward and punishment is not sensible, and then people are puzzled why they do not get the outcome that they want. It's because the reward structure isn't right.
How, aside from making great products, how do you get people excited about Tesla? There's a lot of people I know and that I talk to who are just intrigued and interested and excited about Tesla as a company.
The thing I really focus on at Tesla is like really put all of our money into and attention into trying to make the product as compelling as possible. So, because I think that really the way to sell any product is through word of mouth. So if somebody gets the car, they really like it, and actually the key is like to have a product that people will love. And generally people, if they're at a party or talking to friends or whatever, you'll talk about the things that you love. But if you just like something, it's okay. You're not going to care that much. But if you
get
love
the reactions from the highs and the lows,
yeah,
so you got to make sure people really love
you're gonna talk, and then that'll generate word of mouth. And that's basically how our sales have grown. Like we don't spend any money on advertising or endorsements or So anyone like buys our car, they just bought it because they like the car, and it's genuine. No discounts. I actually even pay full retail price for my own cars.
Okay. Yeah.
And they were really focused on trying to make the cars more affordable, which is really tough. Like in order to make the cars affordable, you really you need high volume. So you need economies of scale. And because the other car companies make a lot more cars than we do, they got way better economies of scale. So as we're gradually able to build up and do more cars, higher volume, then we can build them for progressively less money, and then make the cars available to a wide range of people.
How it is to be successfully growing a small business to a large business.
Okay, well, I mean, to be frank, I don't think there's it's intrinsically good to grow a small business to a large business. Sometimes a small business should be a small business. Sometimes businesses shouldn't exist. Sure, it's true. It's not about growing a business for the sake of growing a business. You have to say, what is this important problem that you're trying to solve that really matters? And then go try to solve that.
Through your career, I'm sure you've seen that too, right? Where there have been projects that, take time to evolve, but that's part of what it takes, I guess, right? Is kind of having that vision and pushing for it?
Sure. I mean, if you're going to try something innovative, then you're in unexplored territories, so the odds that something will go wrong are pretty high. It's only if you try to do something that is already well understood that there's little chance of failure, but then it will not be interesting or innovative. So, for sure, uncharted territory will result in failures necessarily. Otherwise, you're not trying hard enough. I mean, I do think that in terms of creating a company, what Edison said, which was it's 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration, is true. So a lot of it in creating a company is execution. You start off with an idea, and that idea is mostly wrong. And then you adapt that idea and keep refining it, and you listen to criticism. Some criticism you discard, try to discard the wrong criticism, try to listen to the correct criticism, and then engage in sort of a recursive self-improvement, and constantly refining it and making it better. And you have to work super hard, and that's very important. And then just keep iterating on a loop which says, am I doing something useful for other people? Because that's what a company is supposed to do. And a company should only exist if that product or service is truly useful to customers.
I read a quote, which I hope it's true, from you. Tell me if that's not the case, that you said that the most common hiring mistake was weighing too much on someone's talent and not on someone's personality. And then I think it matters whether someone has a good heart.
It does, yes, absolutely. So that's generally where, if I say where sort of the hiring mistakes that I've made in the past, it's been just as I said, it's looking too much at their intellectual capability alone, and not on how they affect those around them. What really matters is for someone's contribution to a company is how they are as an individual and how they affect others around them. I mean, you could say it's also analogous to a sports team. If someone, the best person on the team is not necessarily the one who scores the most goals. It could be the person who assists in the most goals. And if there's one person on the team who's just wants the ball all the time and just wants to kick it at the goal, that can actually be detrimental. So it is important to weigh personality and just are they going to be a good person, and will people like working with them, and that kind of thing. It does make a difference. But in terms of what the rest of the world can do, what sort of I'm trying to think of a useful thing I could say. It's do whatever you can to foster the growth of young small companies, because a young small company it's like a little tadpole. It's got a it's very fragile. Odds of success are very low. So anything that can be done to allow it to grow a little bit and to sustain itself in the face of much larger companies is extremely important. And so that would be my advice to, say, governments or on regional state level, is do whatever you can to
to shield the smaller companies and allow them to grow and be competitive, because the big companies will try to stamp them out.
You know, starting a company for the first time is very challenging for a lot of people. They don't even know where to begin. You must have run into a lot of, I mean, we all made mistakes in starting our first company as far as hiring, like you said, the people you bring in, like the CEO that replaced you. Did you surround yourself with mentors? Who did you look to for advice?
I read a lot of books and talked to lots of people. I didn't have any one person who was a mentor, but I always look for feedback from people around me, and feedback from an historical context, which is books basically. Mm-hmm.
I know you're a huge reader, but from a lifelong learning perspective, constantly trying to add to your toolkit so that you're, a better leader, a better CEO. Are there recommendations that you have for the audience about those kinds of things that you do to keep yourself mentally sharp?
Well, I read a lot less these days than I used to. When I was a kid, I was read all the time. I mostly subscribe to scientific periodicals, like the daily news I find to be a lot of noise, and just very negative. So I generally try to not read the daily news that much, because generally newspapers seem to be trying to answer the question, what is the worst thing that happened on Earth today? It's big, okay? There's a lot of people. Something terrible happened every single day, guaranteed. It's just a big plan. Also, something great happened, but they don't answer that question. So the daily news just tends to make one miserable. But I think like the science and technology periodicals are quite interesting, and usually, if there's some new discovery, it'll be in there. I find Twitter enlightening at times. You learn a bit there, and talking to smart people all the time is very helpful, because that can be a distillation of interesting things that are going on. And certainly try to ask people for the car, what are we doing wrong? What can we fix? What can we make better? And they usually just want to tell me, oh, it's great, I love it. I'm but sure, I understand, but what's wrong with it? And what can we make better? This is this theory of how do we be less wrong?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they always want to tell me the good stuff. I'm like, that's cool, but first tell me the bad stuff. That's very important.
Okay.
Yeah, even small bad things that we can make better.
So it's a lot of minimizing things that can go wrong and maximizing the efficiency of the simple things that go right.
It's like design necessity of every part and every process.
Yeah.
The speed at which, especially the robots are going. Is there any unnecessary movement in the production line that isn't value added? Like we're not actually doing something.
Yeah.
Replacing elements of the production system that are
not needed or redundant.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if trying to work on something, and my experience is it's really hard to if you're trying to figure out what others love but you don't love it, it's really hard to make that great. So when you work on something, if you fall in love with it, that's a good sign. And then don't worry about if others do. If you do, others will.
I mean, do you have a lot of ideas like this? Is it where you have a sketch pad?
Yeah, I've got more ideas than time to implement.
Yeah.
I think so.
Is it something where do you come up with your best ideas? Are you on vacation, or are you kind of just in the middle of the night you wake up and start drawing things down? Or
this sounds really cliche, but the shower is probably wake up and go to shower in the morning. And I think actually what's really happened is kind of stuff is percolated in the subconscious.
Right.
And it's not really occurring in the shower, but you're kind of getting the results of last night's computation, basically.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the things that, if you want to get great engineering talent, then the work itself has to be exciting. The best engineers want to work on the most innovative things. And then as you add great engineers to the company, they will in turn recruit other great engineers. Talents of all kinds. So it's very important that that the thing they're working on is intrinsically interesting, and generally that there's a high energy environment. If the work is intrinsically interesting and they're making progress then you just sort of attract more and more great engineers. When you stop doing really interesting things, then they leave.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. And that's pretty straightforward. You also want to make sure you've got a recruiting function that is very good, and that if somebody great wants to join the company, that they actually get an interview. But this is actually one of my big worries, is like, if Nikola Tesla was alive today, could he get an interview? And if not, we're doing something wrong. And like, I'm not totally sure he could get an interview. and we're like, you know, so if one of the most brilliant engineers that ever lived could maybe not get an interview, we should fix that and make sure we're not like barring the doors from talent. You know, or that we're looking at the right things. Like, generally look for things that are like evidence of exceptional ability. I don't care if somebody graduated from college or high school or whatever. What evidence of exceptional ability? Just give me 3 bullet points, evidence of exceptional ability. Graduating from college is not, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, did they build some really impressive device, win some really tough competition, come up with some great idea, solve some really tough problem? You know, it's like, what did they do that just was like just clear evidence of exceptional ability? It's not necessarily a 4.0 GPA. That's considered to be a contraindicator. Yeah, sometimes.
Generally, for a company, when it's very small, productivity grows quickly because of specialization of labor. And then productivity per person declines due to communication issues as the company gets bigger. And as you have more and more layers through which communication has to flow, that necessarily imparts errors. Like, every time information flows from one person to another, even with the best of intentions, you have information loss. So it's just broken telephone, basically. Yeah. So to the degree that you can alleviate that by doing things like skip level meetings, I think it's a good idea. But I think now the companies are getting bigger, and even with skip level meetings, there's just a huge number of people I don't see at all. I think some kind of written document that people can refer to, you know, sort of like the rules of the company and how things should work. I think
Would that be values?
It's like the rules need to particularly capture counterintuitive things. Mm-hmm. If something's like fairly obvious, or then I guess people will probably do that. But the counterintuitive stuff is less obvious. And one thing we have at the companies is we try to minimize the size of meetings.
Somebody could say, in fact people do, that battery packs are really expensive, and that's just the way they'll always be, because that's the way they've been in the past. You're like, well, no, that's pretty dumb, you know, because if you applied that reasoning to anything new, then you wouldn't be able to ever get to that new thing.
Right.
People want to be more like you.
Really?
So, and you know, for the fate of humankind, I think it would be great to have more Elon Musks. So what do we need to do to become more like Elon?
I don't know if it's, I think it maybe sounds better than it is. I mean, honestly, like there's a friend of mine who's got a great saying about creating a company, which is trying to build a company and have it succeed is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. So, I mean, what tends to happen is it's sort of quite exciting for the first several months of starting a company, and then reality sets in. Things don't go as well as planned. Customers aren't signing up. The technology or the product isn't working as well as you thought, and then that can sometimes be compounded by a recession, and it can be very, very painful for several years. So I think, frankly, starting a company, I would advise people to have a high pain tolerance. If you're a new company, I mean, unless it's like some new industry or new market that, if it's an untapped market, then you have more ability to, the standard is lower for your product or service. But if you're entering anything where there's an existing marketplace against large entrenched competitors, then your product or service needs to be much better than theirs. It can't be a little bit better, because then you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer, and they say, why would you buy it as a consumer? You're always going to buy the trusted brand unless there's a big difference. So a lot of times, entrepreneur will come up with something which is only slightly better. And it can't just be slightly better. It's got to be a lot better.